Hey there, we're going to walk through a little demo just to show you how to transfer information from one screen to the next when you're building your iOS app. We're going to be following along with some of the steps that you might follow if you read through Developments with Fundamentals and you read through the Segues and Navigation Controllers lesson. That's lesson 3.6, and they'll walk you through why you would use navigation controllers, what segues are used for, and all sorts of good stuff. They'll go into a lot more depth than we're going to go into here. But this is just to show you how you might build your app if you're looking to move a user from one screen, collect some information from them, and then transition to another screen and then pass that information to the next screen. So I'll show you a couple of tips and walk you through the little exercise. So let's take a look. So I'm going to hide books and we'll get Xcode up. We're going to create a new app. Of course, we would have done this a few times. We'll call this passing info demo. We'll have a storyboard interface, and we'll be using Swift for our language today. So we'll hit next. We're just going to save this in the projects folder. There we go. We wait for that to write to disk. Here's our project. So the two main things we're going to focus on is, we're going to start with the view controller. That's going to be our very first one. But really, we're going to work on the interface first. So we're going to touch on the main.storyboard. We'll make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And so we have our view controller to start off with. So this is where we're going to collect some info from the user. We'll just collect the person's name or just a bit of text from that user. I'll have a button to transition to the next screen. So I'll go up to the plus button, drag out a text field because that's what we want to use to capture information from the user. We use the guides to guide us there. In fact, I'm going to make it so that it stretches all the way across. It helps if I grab the right thing. All the way over to the edges of my safe area. That's my text field. Now I want to give a little bit of hint so that I can prompt users to type something in. So I'm going to actually edit the placeholder text over here in the attributes inspector. We'll give them a little prompt, enter your name. So we can see the text there. So when we launch the app, we know what to do right away. And now we need a button to transition to the next screen. It doesn't exist just yet. Now we would have talked about our apps getting a little bit more sophisticated at this level. So we're looking at apps like the Contacts app on your phone, where you have a list of contacts on one screen and you tap on a contact and it brings in the next screen with more detailed information about that contact. Maybe ways to call them or email them. So that's the type of flow that we're building here. And that's what it talks about in that lesson in Developments with Fundamentals. So we're just going to build a simple greeting app. So we're actually going to call this button greet so that we know what it does when we tap on it. And now what we need to do is we need to provide the next view controller, that next scene to transition to. So we're going to hit the plus button. And in here, I'm going to start typing view controller. It's going to highlight that for me, so I'm going to drag that out onto the scene. This is why I wanted more space, because I need space to drop out this other view controller. And to let us know that we've transitioned to another screen, I'm actually going to change the background. So I'm going to tap on the view here, and I can change the background attribute in the attributes inspector. So I'm going to go select green, just so it's very obvious that we popped up a new screen. I think it will be anyway, as you see. And now I'm going to add a label because I want to display hello and then the name in there. So I'm going to hit the plus button. I'm going to drag out a label onto the screen, and we'll have that one centered by lining it up with the guides there. Okay. Looking good so far. In fact, we might change the font. So we'll go over to the attributes. We'll change the font. Instead of regular, we'll make it heavy. And maybe we'll make it a bit bigger as well. So tap that font item and up the size a bit. 36 would be good. And we'll make this label stretch from side to side, just so that our text will fit in. Now we'll see some issues with that in a little bit, and I'll leave that up to you to fix. But for now, we'll have our label showing up in the middle. Okay, so what we need to do is we'll need to obviously connect our elements in the first view controller here. Like we need to have an IB outlet for our text field. We need to have this trigger an action. But we're going to show you a different way to trigger that action than using an IB action. I'll show you a way to create a segue. So I'm going to tap on this because this is what I'm going to create an IB outlet for. I'm going to bring up my assistant editor. So now it splits the screen for me and it brings up that view controller that we see over here on the side. So I'm going to hold down the control key, click and drag over here into my class, and I'm going to drop an outlet. So we're going to call this name text field because that's what we're trying to capture here. Okay. All the rest of that looks right. It's a UI text field. It's an outlet we're creating. We've given it a good name. Using camel case, we'll hit connect. And it adds my property for me. Okay. Now we've got to move off to the next screen. Now the next screen, because we want to capture data from the user and store it on our next scene, we have to create some extra code to back that view. Now this one's called View Controller, and it's a subclass of UI View Controller. Now if you're reading through Development Swift Fundamentals, that's in Unit 2. The Classes and Inheritance lesson talks all about classes and how inheritance works and what this all means. So I'd recommend going over that lesson if you're not familiar with what we're talking about here. But we have a View Controller. It's a subclass of UI View Controller. So we actually need to create another one of these to back our second view, our green view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, New, File, and I'm going to pick Cocoa Touch Class as the type of file I'm creating. So I'm going to hit Next. Now it asks me here what the name of the class and then what it's a subclass of. So I have UI View Controller already selected. You can tap on this and scroll through all the different options, or you can just start typing UI View Controller and it'll autocomplete. It'll give you some suggestions. Now I already have a class called View Controller, so I need to name this something that makes sense and makes me realize, oh yeah, I know what this is for. And since it's this example, this is our second view controller we're going to, we're just going to call it that, second view control. Now you'll notice it's capitalized because I'm defining the type, second view controller. So when we define our types, we tend to use capital letters to start with and then camel case throughout. We're not going to need to create an XIB file. We won't worry about that for now. We're going to use the view that we're building here, and the language is going to be Swift. So we'll hit Next. We're going to save it in our passing info demo. And it gives us some stubs here, a view did load where we can do a little bit of work, and we'll do some work in there in a little bit. But the main thing we want to add here first is we want to add a property that will hold that name value that we're passing from our first view controller. So let's add that. So we know how to add properties very early on in Development Swift Fundamentals. It's the second lesson, constants, variables, and data types. So this is going to be a variable because it'll change. We'll just call it name. And it's going to be a string. And you know what? To start off with, we're going to have a default string of just an empty string. So we're always guaranteed to have something in that name property. And now we need to go back to the user interface to wire this up a little bit. So I'm going to go tap on main.storyboard. Now, the way to use this second view controller that I just created, because Interface Builder and Xcode know nothing about it really other than we just created the file, I need to go tap on my view controller, this second one. And in fact, I'm going to use the document outline over here. So I'm going to tap on View Controller over there. I can also tap on the white bar at the top of my view. Now you can see my assistant editor isn't super useful right now, so I'm actually going to close that for now, just to declutter the interface a little bit. Now to change the type of class that we're using here, I would go over to my inspector area and I would tap on this one. the identity inspector. And this is where we can see that we can use a custom class for our view controller. So instead of UI view controller, we're actually going to type in the second view controller. And as I type, it starts auto-completing. So just hit return. And now what I'm going to do is I need to wire this up because I need a reference to this label so that I can set the text on it. So we can display hello name. So now that I have this selected, I'm inside my second view controller. If I go up to my assistant editor, instead of showing me the view controller class, it's going to show me the second view controller class. So now I'm going to tap on the label. I'm going to control, click, and drag over here, just below my name property that I created. And I'm going to drop it. Now this is going to be where we greet our user. So I'm going to type in greeting label here. Greeting label. It's a type UI label. It's an outlet. Storage is strong. That's fine. We'll leave that for now. So we'll connect that up. And there we go. We have another line. So now we have a way to set the text on that UI label. And in fact, what we want to do is we want to take this name value and set the text to hello, comma, the value inside that name property. So we'll do that here. We'll get rid of this comment, so we don't need that comment. So we'll say greeting label, and as I start typing, it'll autocomplete for me. Dot text, so we want to set the text to certain things. So we're going to say hello, comma, and we'll use this thing called string interpolation to add the name in there. So that's our code. So view did load is going to get called when this is just about ready to be shown on the screen, this green screen, and we'll say, hey, give me the value that's in name and stick it together with hello, and that's what's going to show up for our label. There's a lot more information about that in View Controller Lifecycle, which is another lesson in Unit 3 in Development Code Fundamentals, where you'll learn all about view did load, view will appear, view did appear, view will disappear, and view did disappear. And you can take advantage of all of those things, and they have some great explanations about what happens at each stage. But back to our example, I've written pretty much all the code I want to write for a second view controller. I have my name property. I have my greeting label outlet connected up to my interface because I can see that it's connected there. Now, if I close that down, there are two more things we need to do. Now we need to actually create the link between the first screen and the second screen, because if we launch this now, nothing's going to happen. And in fact, let's do that. We're going to switch our simulator to an iPhone 11. We'll hit the play button. There it goes. It's launching the simulator in the background. And while we're waiting for it to launch, the two steps that we're going to follow next are we're going to edit something in the storyboard, and then we're going to go back to our view controller code file, and that's where we're going to make a little change to take advantage of some interesting hooks inside iOS. All right, so it's launching. Okay, so we have our text field here. Maybe it's not the nicest interface yet. We're going to type in my name, and we'll hit greet, and nothing happens because we haven't hooked up that greet button yet. Now, what we've done in the past is we've actually just control, clicked, and dragged over to our system editor and added an action with an IB action. We're not going to do that this time around. We're actually going to use a segue, and we can do that just in Interface Builder. So if we go back to Xcode, we're going to tap on the greet button. I'm going to hold down the control key, click, and drag over to my second view controller. And when I release, I get this menu here that shows me a couple different options for my action segue. Show detail, present modally, present as popover. I want to just show it. Let's just simplify and we'll show it. We can see that my Second view controller changes a little bit the way it's displayed. And I also have this arrow now that represents the segue from one screen to the next. So now, if I were to hit the play button, it's going to launch it much quicker because it's the second time I'm launching it. I can type in my name again, hit greet, and my second view controller pops up. Now I'm not passing the information just yet though. I have to do a little bit more work before we're ready to go. So we have our hello. That's looking great. I just need to add the name and pass it from one controller to the next. From my source, which is that white view controller, to the destination, which is the green view controller. So to do that, let's go back to Xcode. We're going to tap on the view controller.swift. And we're going to add another method in here. And it's going to be called prepare for segue. So we're going to actually start typing prepare. And there's a few options here. I prepare for interface builder and prepare for segue. That's the one that I want, the segue. So I'm going to hit return. And it fills out the whole method signature for me and even lets me start editing some code straight away. It overrides another method in my UI view controller class, which again is all explained in that classes lesson in inheritance. So what we want to do here is we want to say that if we're the source, we're going to a destination. The destination is what we care about. We want to pass some information to that destination. So we want to make sure, first we want to do a quick check to see that our destination is a second view controller. So we would do that like this. We would say if let destination is equal to, we can access the destination by a destination property on our segue. We use that using dot notation. And the way we check to make sure that it's a second view controller is we would just use this as question mark second view controller. Now, if you haven't gotten to the optionals part of the development Swift fundamentals just yet, this may look a bit unfamiliar. All we're doing here is we're saying, hey, it's almost like an English language sentence. If the destination is the second view controller, then cool, we're good to go. So anything inside these braces, we're going to actually run some code. Otherwise, we'll just move on and execute code after this point. The reason why we need to do this is because our second view controller has a special property called name that we define. So we need to access that because we need to put our data that we're capturing from the text field in there. So I'm going to show you one way to do it first, though, that might cause some issues that you might see all the time. So I'm going to get the text from, first off, in our destination, we can say destination dot. Now I have a couple options. I can do the greeting label or I can do name. Now you might be thinking at this stage, oh cool, actually I can just say greeting label. I know that I want to set the text property, so I can do text. We're going to set it to hello. We're going to take the text out of our name text field. So let's try that out. So we'll do hello. We'll do name text field in here because that's on our name, the view controller we're on, the white one. Text, and then we'll use an exclamation mark there. Again, that comes up in lesson 3.1 optionals. But let's try running this. So hit the play button. That should set the greeting labels text to hello, and then the value it pulls out of our name text field. So let's type in my name here. We'll hit the greet button. And we just jump back to Xcode with a little red line. So we've got a small issue here. And it's telling us fatal error, unexpectedly found nil while implicitly unwrapping an optional value. So we could spend a little while debugging this. This is going to be a very common thing you're going to see, especially when we're using this prepare for segue method. Now, we haven't wired up at this stage. iOS has not wired up our greeting label to the greeting label in the code. So they kind of exist independently right now. So that's why we created that name property, because that is fine. That's wired up. So we can actually drop our name there and then let second view controller do the work. Once view did load gets called, everything happened in the right order, so we don't have this kind of error. We can go into debugging this in a later session, but for now, the way to fix this is to say, nope, you know what, I want to use that property that I defined earlier. So instead of greeting label, we'll delete that whole line, so we'll say destination.name. We're just going to assign it the value we take out of our name text field, so where the user should just enter in their name. So that text, again, we'll leave the exclamation mark there. Again, that'll be explained in the optionals lesson. I'll build and run it by hitting the play button. Up it goes. I'll enter my name. We'll hit the greet button. Excellent. There's my next view, and it says, hello, Matt, just like I expected. I can dismiss this by dragging down. I can change it. We can do it more formal. I can change it completely. Excellent. Looks like it's all working, so we're able to pass information to that next view controller. Your example might be much more complex. You might be passing a lot more info, but this is the basic setup. You would pass that info here and just prepare for segue, and that's where you do the bulk of your work. If you see a bug like that crash that we saw, fatal error, that's never a good thing. You may go look and say, do you know what? I actually need to, in my second view controller, that's where I need to add more properties that don't depend on outlets being connected up. And that's where I can store more information. So you might need to add additional properties like preferences and things like that as you go. Hopefully that's given you a good idea of how to create segues from one view controller to the next. Now, an extra exercise you could do is make it look a little bit more natural and use a UI navigation controller. That's actually not a step too far. So what we do is we go back to our main.storyboard. We can select our first view controller and just go down to this button down here and say, embed in navigation controller. I've not added any more lines of code. I've got a small issue because if I look here, my name text field is too high, so I'll drag this button down, tap on our name text field, and we'll also use the arrow key to get that, use the arrow key to bring that down as well, so we can actually see it. But that's the only change I'm going to make. I'm going to hit the play button. See, I've got an extra little gray bar at the top, but I can enter my name in like I was doing before. And hit greet. And it says, hello, Matt, and there's a nice back button at the top. It looks like it's embedded in the same thing instead of popping up from the bottom. So that's a nice way, very quickly, to start building up a really nice flow for your app. If you haven't already, I highly recommend reading Lesson 3.6, Segues and Navigation Controllers. That'll tell you all about how to go further in depth and also how to jump around the stack of views. As we pop this view on top of the stack, it's a little bit like a stack of cards where we keep putting more cards on top. And we only have 2 cards in this case. But you may have a lot more depth if you drill down into and pass information from one to the next to the next. So hopefully that helps you get on your way, passing information from one screen to the next. And we'll see you again soon.